hope you choke on my sincerity. I hope you choke on my sincerity, and I hope you die.
The title of this video is probably more harsh than my norm, but it seems pretty appropriate given the circumstances. Caroline is a YouTuber who got her start rather young, around the ages of 15 or 16, doing what many people have mistakenly labeled as edgy content. In actuality, Caroline's channel is riddled with humor that is dead-on appropriate for her age group, and what I would probably just call Gen Z teen humor. I really just want to call it juvenile humor, but her most popular videos are very indicative of Gen Z's online humor, in particular with the way they're cut.
When you're hanging with the girl and she's looking nice, you think you'll wanna smooch her face, but what is the price? AIDS, herpes, gonorrhea.
Caroline's channel is stylized after somewhat absurdist humor, which is a style of comedy that intentionally violates logic to create illogical events and behaviors. After about a year-long break of making content on her own channel, Caroline maintained an online presence by popping up in a few podcasts here and there, and by, most notoriously, publishing a misleading video that claimed she became pregnant after suffering fertility issues. This video was shortly followed up by a Patreon and comeback announcement alongside her admission that she fabricated the pregnancy story to illustrate the effects of parasociality. We love to see it. I know next to nothing about this young woman, her life, or her background, or whatever, but my first initial assumption after watching these videos, based on the patterns we've observed in previous teen stars and online influencers, was that her ability to think long-term, deeply, and maturely must have gotten stunted somewhere down the line due to the amount of attention she received online during her adolescence. In one of these two contentious videos, she vaguely mentioned receiving threats of sexual violence.
The experience of having a parasocial relationship with your audience can be very uncomfortable. I'll give you an example. When I was 15 and I first started making content, I had a lot of people threaten to rape me every day. And if you could imagine, this was not fun.
So that assumption may not be very far off, but I try to take people as they choose to present themselves. Caroline seems to believe that people were rushing to support her and believe her because of parasociality, referring to the one-sided relationships that can form between an audience member and the performer or creator they're consuming. In her Patreon advertisement, she almost made it seem like people were just so stupid for falling for her gag.
I lied about being pregnant as a joke, and the joke is not that pregnancy under strenuous circumstances is funny. The joke is not that the audience was gullible enough to believe that I was pregnant. The joke is you connected to something that wasn't real, and I have become something that isn't real.
And her core audience members, you know, the ones with the deepest parasocial bonds to Caroline, defended her actions by saying, "OMG, that's just so Caroline." The latter is just so laughable because Caroline actually pinned a comment that said something to that effect under her video, but later removed it, I guess, when she was able to process the level of irony that action entailed. She pinned a comment with an implicit insinuation that they, the long-term audience member, understood her more than the newcomers. The insinuation is that the commenter is deeply parasocially bonded to Caroline, and because Caroline decided to claim that this was a whole critique on parasociality, pinning such a comment is deeply ironic. There were also commenters under the original video who retroactively found out that the whole thing was a goof and a gag that said things like, "Oh my gosh, this was so well acted. If I didn't know this was fake, I would have fell for it." And I hate to break it to these people or to any of you, Caroline's video wasn't an act. It was just a lie. Calling this an act by Caroline would insinuate that she was granted the permission, so to speak, to pretend. When you go to a movie, you are consenting to watching an actor's portrayal. You are very much aware that the happenings are not true and they were not made with the intention to portray truth, but you're still immersed nonetheless. The ability to get people emotionally invested in a movie or show that they know is fake is what makes acting an art form and a powerful tool of expression. What Caroline did was non-consensually take her audience on a journey of deception.
I really hope that I can take you on this journey with me.
An intentional and direct violation of truth. She thinks she challenged how people are willing to believe any person on the internet.
When you're a content creator, the line between entertainment and reality is very blurred. Your audience will become very attached to an abstraction of yourself. And the odd thing is that this connection can become very personally meaningful to the viewers, whilst not being personally meaningful to the creator itself.
But what she actually did was challenge people's desires to view her as a person worthy of any respect. She seems to fancy herself an artist when most others just see her as a spiteful individual who resigned herself to childish stunts because she apparently has forgotten how to truly entertain. Well, actually, that is my perception. Most other people just regard her as a money-grubbing grifter. Maybe she was going for the whole performance art angle, which is often supposed to be controversial and challenge the norms of traditional art forms, but I don't believe that nonsense for a single second, because performance art usually has some sort of call to action. Caroline's little situation here just points out a potential issue and abuses it.
We all come here to find this connection over and over again, and we don't really find it until now, when you subscribe to my Patreon.
Caroline mistook people's willingness to believe her without question as them being slaves to some type of parasocial bond, when in reality, that's how people living in any civilized society just are. Of course we would trust someone when they tell us that they're pregnant. We have no reason to disbelieve them, so why would we? Most people wouldn't readily think that there's something to be gained by lying about a pregnancy on such a large, unprovoked scale, especially when the fake announcement was paired with an extensive absence. It seemed to add up and make sense. When we walk down the streets of our neighborhoods, we may feel a sense of wariness, but we generally trust others not to axe murder us. Living in any society requires a vague baseline of trust towards everyone because we ultimately rely on one another in some way to stay safe. So you're not a goddamn idiot if you saw some random 20-something-year-old woman's video announcing a pregnancy and believed her. You're just a normal functioning human being who doesn't have an overly pessimistic, irrationally paranoid outlook on life. People like Caroline are just too self-interested, too self-involved, too egotistical, too something to understand that. I cannot stress enough that Caroline is a focused and intentional liar. At least in this case. Maybe her other content and interactions with people are different. I actually assume that they are because she overall doesn't really seem to be a really bad person, just someone who is probably still sorting out some big truths of life in her own personal philosophy. That being said, I don't believe Caroline's justification of this being a parasocial experiment, because why would I? Why should you? She's lost the good faith baseline trust we're instilled to have within society because we only operate under that assumption of truth until we have been shown a reason to question otherwise. And she has given us more than enough to question that. The way Caroline's initial video was set up was to deliberately create a believable narrative. Girl disappears from her channel for a year. Girl comes back using an unplanned pregnancy and fertility issues as the reasoning. Girl shows her uncertain feelings around the pregnancy, and all of this was done in her normal tone and cadence. There was no way to distinguish truth and lie. She also utilized aspects from many other women and girls' stories and experiences to spin this narrative, which is one of the most fucked up parts about these videos.
I'm good, guys. I'm actually so good. I want to have a kid. I just don't think I can have a fucking kid right now. And I really want a kid. I do want a fucking kid. And I'm not being stupid. I'm not being like, oh, well, you're young. You don't really know what it's like. You have so much life to live. Fuck you! I'm having a baby. Like, I'm having the baby. It's not like it's not like I'm getting rid of it. It's like I'm having the baby. I'm gonna have a baby.
Remember how I had like shit going on with my uterus when I was 16? Like I had surgeries just to get stuff removed. So like my fertility's always been kind of weird. If I have this kid, it's very likely that I won't be able to have another one.
It's not people, especially young women, emotionally bonding to her specifically that had them posting comments of support for her pregnancy journey. It was probably them understanding the hardships that many young women face when they become pregnant before they are truly ready. Caroline attempted to punish people for having truly empathetic responses. Moreover, a parasocial bond doesn't just form from watching a singular video. It's a one-sided relationship. Emphasis on the relationship aspect. It requires a sense of familiarity. Maybe Caroline's poor argument for the experiment would work when geared at only her audience.
Some of you in my audience are pretty weird, and that's why I decided to keep a lot of my more sensitive information behind a paywall.
But this spread so far beyond her audience, and she had to have known that would happen. She's not exactly what you would call a small creator. I am not parasocially necessarily bonded to her, nor is it Tozy or Sensitive Society or Ready to Glare or any of the other channels that commentated on this spectacle. Most commentators are just simply annoyed or flabbergasted. And I'm annoyed because I thought we were done with disguising stupidity, pervertedness, and generally lazy content as social experiments. For the people who have been on YouTube as adults for the last decade, we've seen this shit 1,001 times over. Caroline is not the first, second, and she certainly won't be the last person to pull a stunt like this. And this is where I do think it's worth mentioning that Caroline's audience more than likely skews young because of her style of humor and her age, which adds a whole nother level of fucked upness. After Caroline released the second video, it became very clear and evident that she wants to use parasocial bonds for the same purpose that we all use it for: money. However, Caroline's methodology is a bit different from the way most ethical creators operate. Most creators who have a single care about maintaining the trust of their audiences and their own integrity don't just outright lie about some shit. Not unless you're part of the beauty community, that is. And even if we did want to compare Caroline to a beauty influencer's willingness to lie about a product for the sake of a check, the situations are still not equivalent. Lying about or exaggerating the effectiveness of a lipstick or an eyeliner pales in comparison to attempting to manipulate people's emotional responses and weaponize those responses against them because you were too much of a pussy to admit that you were desperate to come back with a bang. Caroline just seems like another previously successful creator being so scared to fail that they do something outrageous to garner attention. I simply cannot make this video without acknowledging the effectiveness of Miss Caroline's little scheme. She currently has over 650 members on her Patreon and is making over $1,000 per month for posting what she claims to be personal and raw videos. Caroline has successfully taken advantage of her audience's parasocial bonds while telling them that is what she is doing, while also trying to confuse them on whether or not she is actually being authentic at any point in time. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm a bit more irate with Caroline than I am with most creators I've covered on my channel, and I have reviewed some insufferable people. God. What is off-putting to me personally about Caroline is not her callous lie or her inability to understand how people work, but because I can't stand internet personalities who constantly try to obfuscate their thoughts and values. I don't find it artsy or take it as an enduring subversion of my expectations. I see it as an irritating, miserable way to maintain an illusion of mysteriousness or as a method to constantly redefine or rebrand oneself. In other words, it's a completely phony persona that is indicative of the person behind it lacking conviction, identity, or the care to stand their own ground. Contrary to Caroline's probable belief, personas are not entirely falsified. There are large elements of truth within them. My persona on YouTube is quite pretentious, and I seem to come off as more measured to people, and while there is some truth to both of those things, in my actual life, I am considerably more forceful with my opinions and less polite in the delivery. Because of the argumentative, apathetic nature of my profession, I don't really need to be. In a video that is only available on her Patreon that I was sent a link to via email by a subscriber, Caroline states that she was initially going to post an apology, but decided not to because she doesn't care what people think about her actions because they're not seeking truth like she is. Because I'd like to maintain some sort of integrity with my audience, I will not be sharing this video since it is behind a paywall. I typically only find it reasonable to expose such content if the creator has done something that goes far beyond just a breach of morality. So for example, if a creator is encouraging unethical practices or committing literal crimes. You can probably find the video archived on some other site for free, I'm sure, but I will not be doing that digging for you. So because I won't be exposing the actual video, we're going to go with the trust me bro stance here. In this response video, Caroline stated she finds social media to be interesting because we can control and manipulate other people's reality. Hi, my poets. Yes, even though I decided not to show any of Caroline's video on Patreon, I did want to share a couple of quotes from the video just to give you guys an idea of where my perceptions are coming from. The implications of a person being able to put on a song and dance on social media and to have it to be really emotionally provocative to the extent that an audience would empathize with the character they see on screen and believe that it's real, because there is this expectation that what you're watching on social media is real, and that if that person, this character, that sharing their false reality has a call to action and ask you and the audience to do something about it, and then you do it. That, to me, is fucking wild. I just wanted to illustrate the insanity of all this. The first video can feel so real, so compelling, so emotionally manipulative, and then the call to action at the end of the day is just heartless and shameless. And I love it. As much as I would love to explain that to everybody, it wouldn't matter. The people that don't understand it won't understand it. This is a very young person who grew up on the internet and got too much attention too fast on the internet approach to people's understandings of reality. Caroline's stunt didn't alter people's reality. X, Y, or Z influencer acting dishonestly or scamming people does not alter people's realities. Our realities are not so easily manipulated just because people are liars. The only thing that happened here is Caroline became one of those liars. That's the only reality we're living in right now. If anything, her own reality is a bit distorted since she thinks that she is so impactful despite just being another one of the millions of creators on this platform that create content for the purposes of making money. She also referred to content itself as propaganda. To me, YouTube looks like a big propaganda machine. Your phone, social media is regulating your mood. For a lot of people, it regulates your mood, and beyond that, it shapes your perception of reality. It tells you what is socially appropriate, what is not socially appropriate. It triggers you and then consoles you. And while I think she might be onto something here, her reasoning is so surface level. Propaganda is material that is highly biased or misleading in nature, used to push certain ideologies and perspectives. Most content creators who don personas have a goal of making money, yeah. But what ideas are they pushing onto others? What are their goals? Sharing an opinion or conveying an argument, unpopular or not, is not the same as pushing an agenda. One could probably call LeftTube, for example, a form of propaganda because the content is politically biased, sometimes to the point of dishonesty. However, random creators like Caroline, there's no ideology being pushed except maybe the concept of think more or laugh more or be unserious. I see Caroline's prior content as an artistic expression that has something to say with the intent to entertain. That's not propaganda. That's not bending someone's reality. My lord, she takes herself too seriously, which I was surprised to learn because her Patreon just screams, "I'm unserious." All this to say, Caroline's rage-baiting deflection got her what she wanted, an effective way to come back to YouTube and start a successful Patreon. Online, because of how quickly people shift their attention from one thing to another, she'll probably just fade into the background in a few more weeks and only remain in the minds of her own audience. But I hope when she inevitably looks back on the situation in the future, she would have developed the self-awareness to say, God, I was such a fucking idiot. The kind of parasocial connections I'm interested in are the ones that lead people to defending heinous and sometimes criminal actions of certain influencers, because you'll find that in most of these cases, the influencers in question have interacted with their audiences on such deeply personal scales that it should be called into ethical question. Their interactions frequently go beyond the consensual dance of, I remain human or relatable enough and keep you entertained and you give me money. However, on the audience's part, I theorize that parasocial bonds are largely connected to one's ego, and the influencer becomes an extension of that ego, which can be an underlying contributing factor to the amount of defensiveness people often feel when their faves are being critiqued or analyzed. Caroline is not an example of this. Caroline is an embodiment of how confusion and the unwillingness to admit that when you were duped can lead to audience retention. People love an underdog, And with the amount of commentary videos from large creators that have discussed Caroline, she can now frame herself as that underdog, despite her following size. Caroline may not be the devil, but she is someone who probably knows she made a mistake or an egregious miscalculation, and rather than just saying that, she attempted to deflect and now has to stand in the mess that she made. And well, I hope the attention and money was worth it. And that is all I have for you guys today. Please remember to like and subscribe. Go ahead and drop me a comment if you do so, please. And until next time, bye.